Hello and welcome to another episode of the To Baldly Go podcast. Thank you for joining us on our mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to baldly go where so many have gone before. My name is Aaron, and I am on my first trek through the galaxy, watching a few episodes of Star Trek each week, then discussing them with my wife Abbie and our friend Nate. This week, we discuss the next 3 episodes of the original series, Season 2, Journey to Babel, Friday's Child, and The Deadly Years. And with that, take us out of orbit. Ahead, Warp Factor 1.
But I was committed. I was late coming on because I had to finish our last episode.
Well, if it makes you feel better, it took me 3 nights to finish our last episode. So
just because you disliked it that greatly, or because other stuff was going on?
Other stuff was going on. I got started and didn't finish it and went to bed. And the next night, I got started and everything hit the fan, and I turned it off with 12 minutes left because I wasn't paying any attention to it. And last night I finally got through the last 12 minutes of the episode.
Now,
but
I was going to say, to be fitting with that episode, though, hopefully you started it over, forgetting that you had already watched to that point.
That would have been really funny, actually. I should have.
Consistency.
Didn't I say
that?
Yeah, it's not so much method acting as method watching. Is that it?
We're method watching. I like it. Does that mean I get to randomly be aggressive to people and completely rude?
Yes.
P.S. Now I'm just going to start doing your job, Nate, just because I've got no field experience in that, but I've decided that you're not fit for duty. So
perfect. I mean, that's how it works, right?
That's how it worked.
You just have a higher rank, so take over it all. Don't take into consideration that there's probably half a dozen people left on that ship that have actually commanded it.
And then immediately proceed to the war zone.
Yeah. Let's just cut to the neutral zone. No big deal. We're not going to commit an act of war. That's fine. Whatever.
We're going to switch everyone from Windows to Linux.
Yes.
In my first job as CEO of your company. I've got no idea what I'm doing or what either company means. But that's what I'm going to tell you.
You're going to provide no training, so it can fail in the worst possible way.
Exactly.
Sorry,
so should we, I was going to say, should we just start with the last episode we watched? It's not like they the order matters particularly. Right. So let's just do that.
Yeah, it works for me.
We'll start with the episode that got us to the halfway point of the original series. We are halfway through with episode 12, The Deadly Years.
Oh my God. How did that even happen?
Well, it was like the residue
Did you
from
forget?
the comet.
You
That's
again
how it happened.
reliving?
They explained it.
Yes. And I'm talking about the halfway point. How did we even get there?
I know. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, I thought this episode was okay. Yeah. I thought it was a bit too long. I thought it was repetitive and redundant in the middle. The competency hearing, the general old age effects were just a little okay, got it. So yeah, I just felt like the episode is just kind of okay. I loved the ending, but overall I was just it was all right.
I get amused with, and it's not just Star Trek or this episode in general, but I'm always amused with how they age their characters when the characters are suddenly older for reasons. And then you compare that to, I don't know what they actually look like at, that age, like what William Shatner looks like today. And isn't even close.
I made a note that I think
he's just not as big.
I was going to say, one, I think the way it just, I don't know if people just looked older back then. I mean, in that episode, Spock was 36, 2 years younger than me.
And Kirk is
And
34?
well, I think Shatner was 36 when they did that episode too, but like they were younger than me, and I feel like Leonard Nimoy for sure looks a fair bit older than I do. So I feel like even then their view of like elderly people looked much
Oh my
older
gosh.
than maybe they would look today. So I mean, they said Kirk there, he was
60?
bordering on this decrepit old man, and he was somewhere between like 60 and 72. I wrote down that Shatner seems better in his 90s now than this image of like 60s to 70s back then.
Yep.
So yeah, it was just weird. I don't know if we're aging different now, uh, or what, but I mean, and we've talked about this in other episodes, like everyone just seems older.
I think that's a commonality though in the 60s. I mean, even think of like the Golden Girls. They say that like
Yeah.
their ages are like 60, whereas I mean, they're the same age in the Golden Girls as like Sarah Jessica Parker is, J-Lo is, all those people now, like the same age as they were in the Golden Girls, as Jessica or whatever her name is, as J-Lo is, where it's like it just depends on how it was portrayed by that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think in general we're probably healthier. How many of those guys were, multi-pack a day smokers
True.
at the time? And I mean, that does some pretty crazy things to you. And I mean, Aaron, I know you're trying to cut back, but I mean,
Yep.
All that heavy smoking.
yeah.
I do think it's interesting though. I'm curious if what William Shatner's take is on this episode. Now that he is in his 90s, like, does he look back at this episode? If I can remember it, like, no jokes aside about this whole episode and what it's trying to get at, like, just because you're old doesn't mean you're decrepit. But I'm curious if he looks back and goes, that is so ridiculous. I would kill to be 60 years old again, to lose 30 years.
You need to ask that at the Q&A for the movie screening you guys are going to.
I don't think it's actually a Q&A. I think it's just him talking. So
never mind. I
think it's just him.
If there is, you should go ask.
Now, I'd guess if he could go back to being in his 60s, maybe he would. If he could go back to being like that in his 60s, probably not.
Yeah.
That's true.
There were some...
But it does... Sorry, I was just going to say, it does bring up a question of how much of our vitality is because of social convention. So we are do we age because that's what's expected of us at that time? We act the age of society because of that. Or if we're told and we're not putting limitations on by society or by what's normal, do we have much, much more? So if you're not in that time, if you're told, in your 60s, 70s, you're aged, you're decrepit, you're of no value anymore, do they convince themselves of that as well? And that's how they are. Versus now we are like, no, you can do whatever you want. Keep going. Yeah. You know what I mean? What was it? We had Dottie teaching us tennis in college and she was in her 70s. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I think it's a very interesting on society on that way, where it's like amazing how humans will restrict ourselves if we're told we have to be restricted, or we're told, no, you can't do that. We're like, oh yeah, I believe you. I can't do that. But then, as things change and someone goes, no, I don't have to do that, they become more. And I think that's very interesting. It's interesting how that episode aged for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think overall, Aaron, I'm kind of with you. It was okay. Like, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. It didn't bother me. There weren't a whole lot of like cringy, whatever moments of it. I mean, it was an interesting look at, aging and how we perceive aging as a society. The concept of, just because you're old, you're also losing your mind. And in this case, obviously they were, but we think of those going hand in hand to the point where, we frequently remark when somebody gets into their 80s, 90s, over 100, and they're still, air quotes, sharp as a tack, right? That's a pretty novel concept for someone who is that age. And so for this to kind of, accelerate that and analyze that and go through the whole, like, well, obviously Kirk can't be in command because he's old and he's forgetting his orders. So we got to put Commodore Stockton in the chair instead, who is arguably way worse than old and decrepit Kirk.
Yeah.
Not arguably, actually, way worse.
Now, at the same time, Kirk was not fit for command because he gave orders again that he already had, and then when he got called out that he already had, then he got pissed. So it's like,
was he more or less fit?
Stockton was not wrong in saying Kirk shouldn't be captain, but Stockton was also worse than even bad Kirk would have been.
Well, and I think that's kind of my point. Like, I'm not saying that Kirk was fit for command. He certainly was more fit for command than the guy who had all his faculties about him.
Yep.
And I think there's a certain level, when you've sat in that chair for long enough, of a certain amount of that job is instinctual, and you can probably do that despite the fact that maybe you didn't remember you'd given that command before.
But I mean, you could also say he set up a good enough crew that he ordered Sulu to do something, and Sulu said, "Again?"
Yeah.
So he's set up like a good executive. He surrounded himself with competent people.
And I would argue that
it's not always the case on this show.
I would also argue that because of that, they would be like, let's take the battle with the Romulans in the neutral zone as an example. I think his crew could have compensated for anything that was going on with Kirk because he has coached them into such a great bridge crew that they very likely would have anticipated a lot of what he would have asked them to do. And they're not necessarily going to do that with Stockton sitting there because they also don't want to disobey orders.
Yeah, there's not a familiarity there where they know what the line is and what they can and cannot comment to and do. I mean, they did kind of do that, though. Like, they don't take prisoners, sir. But there's only so much you can do without essentially committing career suicide, right? Yep. I mean, I think it more just like, being difficult to work with or something like that from a, I mean, that still holds true today, right? Even though you know something's right, you don't want to tell the boss, like, dude, you're being dumb, because that still comes to burn you. You were the person to embarrass the boss, or, you know what I mean? So sometimes there's only some things you can do.
You mean I'm the only one on this call who frequently says to their manager they're being stupid?
Wow.
Has happened. No, I probably haven't called him stupid, but we do joke around about that stuff quite a bit. So
thankfully, I like my manager a lot right now, and his manager. So I never have to have those conversations or feel like I have to, but I can definitely see being in that situation. And I have been in that situation in previous.
I think more often than not, people have managers where they can't do things like that. I was more.
You have to be sensitive to feelings as you're doing that versus doing, quote unquote, the right thing. I find it interesting. There are so few command people within this 200, or how many people we've established around the Enterprise right now? Come on, Nate. 400 this number? At least 200 something.
It's 400. It's 400 something.
Is it?
Yeah. It was 200 something. It was 200 or so in the cage. Okay. And then in the subsequent episodes, it's
bumped up
400, give or take.
Okay. So we've got a lot of people on this ship. Why do we have exactly 3 command officers? Like, only 3 people who could take control of the bridge?
And it's Scotty, Spock, and Kirk. Like,
I was going to say, clearly because of budgetary constraints.
Clearly, but
which is why we don't always see Scotty.
But I'm going to challenge that, and I know that's what they said, but I'm going to challenge that too, because we've seen Sulu take the chair, we've seen Chekhov take the chair. I don't think Spock was in
there with it
of taking the chair. Like, as far as that group that was affected by this comet and the radiation was concerned, he was the least impacted. I mean, he was the one working with Kirk's ex-girlfriend to figure out, I didn't write down her name apparently, to figure out how to fix this. Like, he had his wits about him enough that he certainly could have commanded the Enterprise and didn't.
Well, he also basically turned it down because didn't Stockton try to say, like, you should take over?
I'm the command officer.
Yeah, and I thought he told Spock that Spock should take over, and Spock was like, "No, I'm not in a state to do that."
I don't. Maybe that's the case. Again, I watched this over 3 nights, so it's possible that things got
maybe I saw that wrong, but it seemed like Spock was almost taking that position of we'll say not a drop and driving, where he was like, I'm compromised in any way, so I'm not going to take that on.
But they also seem so, in general, upset with the fact that Stockton was in command that
I feel like that speaks to your argument, though, that Spock wasn't himself. Like, as much as we might have thought that he would have been okay to take command and not, as Aaron said, he just had a drop. He didn't see a problem with someone with no command experience taking control. That's very not Spockish to see all the way through the end on that. So I think that does kind of support that maybe he wasn't in good shape. Now, would he have driven the Enterprise immediately into the neutral zone? Highly doubt it. That's kind of an instinctual thing for a command person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't dislike the Commodore as much as I've disliked other Commodores who have taken control of the Enterprise. I think he was genuinely trying to do the right thing and didn't know how to do it. He saw something that was scary. He saw the command crew not in the right state of mind, did not know what to do about it. And he did the only thing he could have was, I've got rank. I'm going to step up. I'm going to get these people to some place where they can get better. And he said that from day one. He's just trying to get them better because, well, yes, the Enterprise does have a good medical facility. Yeah, but your chief researcher is 900 years old at this point. So, I mean, he's seeing the writing on the walls that this is not going to go well as soon as McCoy dies. We've got no one who can do this. So I think I have only positive feelings towards the Commodore. Like, he wasn't good, but he wasn't set up for success. And he did everything he could in a very bad situation.
He really did come in just to say, like, he was like, nobody else is taking over. I have to, and I'm next in line here, because he couldn't kick it off to Scotty because Scotty was just gone. I was looking it up here, and the Commodore did say to Spock, understand me, my admiration for Kirk is unbounded. He's a great officer, but Mr. Spock, I need your help and your cooperation. Spock said, for what, sir? And I guess it was Stocker, not Stockton. I don't know.
Really? My closed captioning said Stockton every time, so I rolled with it.
It could be that this is wrong. No, Commodore Stocker.
That's unfortunate.
We're
all right. Well,
Stalker, like shelf stalker, not creepy stalker.
Let's start this episode over so we can all use the right name.
But yeah, so he asked Spock to he said he wanted Spock's help and cooperation. For what? I would like you to take command of the Enterprise. Spock says, on what grounds? And on the grounds that the captain, because of his affliction, is unable to perform his duties. And Spock said, need I remind you, sir, I too have contracted the same affliction. And then Spock said, so Stalker also said, yes, but you're Vulcan. You have a much greater lifespan. You show the effects to a much smaller degree. And Spock said, I'm half human, sir. My physical reflexes are down. My mental capacity is reduced. I tire easily. No, sir, I am not fit for command. So Spock, he wanted Spock to do it. And Spock said, I can't. I'm with it enough to recognize my weaknesses, whereas Kirk wasn't with it enough to recognize that he was unfit. Spock said, I'm not going to even put myself in that spot. So Stalker was then left with
right.
Yeah.
Terrible situation.
And then
I think
then called the competency hearing because that was what the next step in the rules said. Not that he wanted to, it wasn't something he was choosing. He was saying this is what must happen since you will not take command.
Okay. I missed that entirely, but again, I blame it on just
He didn't want the command. I agree with that. He only did it once he saw Kirk really failing multiple times. And when he started to give a message on a unsecure channel, things like that. It was really when he saw concerns that he started stepping in and doing that. So I do appreciate Stalker for that. I will say though, I'm highly disappointed in Kirk on this one, because I think a good leader knows when to step away. Now, I know we're going to blame this on, I think they were going for this old curmudgeon-y kind of person where you don't care about anything but yourself kind of thing. And I think that did the character a disservice. I think Kirk has demonstrated numerous times when he is unfit or he is not in the right state of mind, he has people to support him, and he does that. And his inability to even recognize when multiple people are telling him, hey, sir, this isn't a good thing. You're struggling right now. We got to do something else. He really wasn't listening to anything anyone said to him, which is what command has to listen to. You have to listen to your resources. So, and then I found it a waste of time that they had this meeting while they're dying. It's okay, so they age by a day. So sitting in this meeting for an hour to see if Kirk is competent cost them 15 years. Solid.
Yep.
Yeah. So in fairness to Kirk on that, though, they did also mention that their mental faculties aged much faster than their physical. So while he looked one way, he was also mentally much closer to completely gone. So Spock, I think at one point said, we'll have about a week to live, but we'll be vegetables well before that. Yeah, maybe that's getting a bit nuanced with the episode. I think part of this episode was, okay, what would be an interesting thing here? What if all the characters got super old? And then they told a story around that. And I think for the most part, the story worked, but it was just kind of okay. There were a few parts of it that I did really like. Some of the things we've talked about. There was a line I really liked, and it was really fitting with a book I just finished reading again. When, again, I'm blanking on her name, but she said, no problem is not soluble, not even ours. And I just, again, finished reading the book The Beginning of Infinity, which is all about explanations that can transform the world. And a recurring theme in that book is that problems are inevitable in progress. If you're static, then you may not have problems, but you're also not going anywhere. But problems are inevitable, but problems are also soluble. So there's no problem that can't be solved. So any problem we face, if we can't yet solve it, it's merely a matter of not having the requisite knowledge. So I thought that was interesting to have that come up in a book that I literally finished reading yesterday.
Yeah.
But so again, things that I pick up on that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed that approach to it, where I appreciate, or I like that approach and those comments that fit this kind of worldview or philosophical view, philosophy, whatever. That, I don't know, just fits with other stuff that I look into. A couple other thoughts I had. So it was an act of war for the Enterprise to go into the neutral zone.
Yep.
Yet was it not an act of war for the Romulans to be there?
Yep.
Or were they 1 inch on their side of the neutral zone border, and as soon as it was breached, game on? Or how did that work?
I think the idea is and this is something that you see a few times in this universe, but once one side breaches the neutral zone, it's just kind of game on. you punched me, so I'm gonna punch you back kind of thing.
You picked a fight. Now
Yeah.
it's fair game.
Yep. So I think
Yeah.
that's the idea here. But also let's keep in mind that it's not the first time that the Romulans have breached the neutral zone, and we've seen that in previous episodes where unprovoked they come across and blow up a few star bases here and there, right?
Yeah.
So
So
seems to be a very fuzzy concept for an act of war. I
yeah.
assume on the back end, like when the episode is over, there's a whole bunch of like diplomats that do negotiations and they smooth things over and life goes on again. Like that's all I can think
Yeah.
of is what's happening on the back end. But
Yeah. And with that, I really did. I loved the way they ended it when Kirk said that he would ignite the Corbomite, which would destroy everything within 200,000 kilometers. I thought that was just great.
That was such an awesome thing. Like, and a nice callback too.
I liked that a lot, and I liked that. Okay, it's this fake thing. He's totally bluffing, and doing it, sending a message on a channel that they have hacked, and so he knows that they're going to get the message, and then they will act accordingly. I thought that was just an awesome way to wrap up an otherwise okay episode. Didn't do enough to make me bump it up to good, but I gave it a solid 6. With that note that I absolutely loved the way it ended.
The other thing that I really liked is that McCoy had to make a more potent shot for Spock, and that he removed all the breakables from sickbay. I thought that was very funny.
Yep.
Just because we saw what happened to Kirk, and so if you assume that Spock's going to be way worse, then he's just going to rage in there, and that image was pretty funny in my mind.
Yeah. So I gave it a 6. Did you said you thought it was okay? Did you give it a 6 as well, Nate?
Yes. Abbie, how about you?
I thought it was kind of fun. I'll give it higher. I think I'll give it a
Just kidding.
I'll give it a 7. I thought it was interesting. It was a very Star Trek episode to me, right? Sure. You've got this plague, this major thing that we've got to conquer as a ship by a deadline. We've got command's got to figure out what to do. We've got some, farm boy person who's got to step up, whether good or bad. I think it was a very Star Trek episode. It really resonated that way. Had no cringe moments for me, or at least nothing I was like, oh, this is really hard to watch now. Moments that was really clean. And it had more of that, like, it had that space element. I don't know. It was a good episode to me. I enjoyed it as far as I enjoy the original series goes. And I think they did a really good job of playing through consistency on the episode. So he gets removed from command for trying to put things out on a subspace channel that has been hacked by the Romulans. And then he defeats the Romulans by using the same thing, that callback to something that happened earlier in the episode. And even Uhura going, oh my God, he's not better yet. I thought this was over. Like her eyes, she was just like, oh no.
I know what I'm doing. Like I said
like,
this.
You got to trust me this time. Right. And that to me was good writing. It was clever. It was a clever way to do it. And it was concise, but it also had that cohesion with earlier in the episode and just so simple. And the simplicity of it made it really elegant to me. So I really appreciated that of it. I mean, again, cringe moments, weird stuff. I get all that. I'm becoming less and less upset with, some of the bad costumes and things like that, because I'm recognizing I'm not watching on the big TV any longer. I've started watching on my phone. So a much smaller viewing screen is making it a lot more manageable to watch. And so you're not seeing this big, thick makeup. You're not seeing the random horns and stuff like that. So I think that was pretty good. But I think the cast is really getting into stride with each other, and you can kind of see that.
Yeah.
And
give them a lot of leeway for the costumes and stuff like that because of the time, because of the fact that nobody was sinking a lot of energy into costuming then, by and large, and for the exact reason you said, Abbie, of like, we're watching this at a time when, the picture's really good. So you can see every little flaw.
Gonna say we're watching it remastered when that probably wasn't really even a term in 1967.
Not even a little bit. So
yeah, I like I said too, Abbie, completely agreeing. I loved the way they just wrapped it all up at the end. This is an episode though that I think would be better off being made at a time like in the way shows are done today, where it's not, say, for a streaming service, where they can, if it takes 38 minutes to tell the story, they can take 38 minutes and tell the story and then just be done with it, instead of dragging it out to 50 minutes to fill in those breaks and keep the advertisers happy, and give just the requisite commercial breaks. So I felt like the competency hearing and some of the scenes, they show the lieutenant losing her hearing, they show Bones getting a little more just gray and just
ornery.
Old. Yeah, ornery, curmudgeon-y. They show Kirk getting like old and dumb, and then Spock just getting a tiny bit older, and yeah, just getting a little bit gray and maybe a little more wrinkly. So, and then complaining about the cold.
I
felt like a lot of that was good, but then it was done again. And then they did the competency hearing and all of that was brought up again. So I felt like it just got too redundant, where if they could have told this story in 38 minutes and it would have been a really strong episode, but some of that redundancy I think took away from it for me.
I kind of loved McCoy's increasingly small town backwoods doctor attitude as the episode.
Southern.
Like the older he got, the more backwater, like,
yep,
just
rub some dirt on it.
It was that character, and it's very, I don't know. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but his acting experience up until this point was westerns, and so it felt very Western to me, right? Just that attitude of the cranky old man in some, Western frontier town who happens to be a doctor. Like it fit really well with that theme.
Yeah. I'll go with one quick piece of trivia on this one, and then we can move on to the other episodes. This episode had the oldest or the earliest born actor to appear in any Star Trek episode. Playing 29-year-old Robert Johnson was an 85-year-old Felix Locker, born in 1882.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I recognized him. He's been in other stuff in that era. I couldn't have told you what, but like, I know this guy.
He was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
There you go.
Gunsmoke, one episode. Yeah. But yeah,
the guy
just
on the planet?
interesting.
Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, the guy that they actually talked to, not the dead guy. Even though he promptly died after they brought him up to the Enterprise. Yeah. So let's jump back 2 episodes. Now to episode 10, The Journey to Babel.
Is it Babel or Babel?
They kept saying Babel
in
the episode.
That's
I would have said Babel, but I said Babel because that's what they said. This is where they were going to, they brought a number of different ambassadors on the Enterprise to go to Babel, and then it was a murder mystery on the Enterprise. This is another one I thought it was just, I wasn't taking notes watching it. I was just enjoying watching it. So yeah, This episode, I thought it had some really interesting points, seeing more of Spock's background, seeing kind of that dichotomy of his human and Vulcan natures and the way he was treated, particularly by his father. I thought there were some interesting things. You're seeing more planets come in, more information, more background on the Federation. Yeah, overall, I felt this was another just kind of okay episode. Um, I didn't really have much feeling on it in any direction. There wasn't anything particularly bad about the episode. There wasn't anything particularly great about the episode, I didn't think. But yeah, it was fine, but didn't really pull me much in any direction.
I disagree. I actually really enjoyed this episode, and I think I enjoyed it because of the world building and the
Sarek.
What's that?
Sarek.
And Sarek, for sure. I mean, to see that background of Spock, you hear about his parents, and I think we've even heard in previous episodes that he has a somewhat tenuous relationship with his father in general. But to kind of see that and witness those interactions, and frankly, how emotional two unemotional beings can be towards each other, I thought was really, really interesting. The murder mystery side of it, I thought was kind of fun. I don't know. I enjoyed it for the world building aspects of it, and I gave it an 8. Just because I don't know. It really just kind of held my attention the entire time, and I liked everything that I was seeing along the way. It was funny, it was interesting, it built out the universe. Just really liked it.
That's fair. Like I said, I didn't have any negative feelings about the episode. I also didn't have any overwhelmingly this was an awesome episode feelings about it either. I thought it was fine. I did like some of that new it's fun when you see Spock, more of Spock's background and him kind of being maybe not a direct focal point, but still a bit of a focal point of the episode, because any interaction with Sarek or his mom was really, those were scenes about Spock, it felt like. So I thought a lot of that was very interesting stuff, but again, just I don't know if maybe I was tired when we were watching it. I don't know, it didn't captivate me the way other episodes have. But it wasn't anything that I was like, oh man, this episode was bad. I thought it was just it was somewhere between okay and good, but I felt probably a little closer to just okay. And I know that goes against on IMDb, I think this one's rated like an 8.5.
Yeah, it's a very well-respected episode, I think, because of the Sarek backstory. And
I think this is something where I think we're going to see the reason we like it is because of context. Whereas if we watch this like Aaron did without any context whatsoever, we'll be like, okay, this is kind of weird. You got a bunch of aliens in one room together. You got Spock. Who cares? You're just not vested in the character yet, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Nick and I are vested in Sarek because we've seen and heard about him all the way through Next Gen and beyond.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
and
100%
and the same
right.
actor, correct? As I recall, isn't it the same actor even?
Mark Leonard.
So
all the way through.
You see this guy and you're just like, oh my God, it's Sarek. Like, Sarek is everything. And then you watch through even like Discovery and you realize like, oh my gosh, he is an asshole here. But is he actually as much of an asshole as we thought, or is there context of him being an asshole? So the character is much deeper for Nate and I than it is for you, Aaron. And we're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much that comes from his character. More than just this. He needs to live. And then like that conflict with Spock is so great because it's more than just a standard father-son conflict. There's just depth to that we just don't know yet in this episode. And so it's that anticipation. It's that it's coming later on that makes you enjoy seeing it now.
You're 100% right. And that's sort of the challenge with doing this like we're doing it, because I do have the context, right? And I do know the significance and even more of the backstory than what they talk about in the episode. But I don't know. It still makes it fun for me, right? I know I've seen this episode before. I remember this episode. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen it, but I've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I thought it was interesting too, the way they had different aliens in there and they were having their conversations, and then the one was approaching him like, hey, you need to tell me how you're going to vote on this because I need to know. Even if it doesn't make any difference to anything. It was one of those, well, it matters to me.
yeah.
Kind of deals. But
we don't see a lot of aliens in the show in general, right? I'm sure for budget reasons, we just don't. So this is kind of like an all-out episode for them. We not only have humans, we've got Vulcans and Tellarites and Andorians, and they all look significantly different from each other, which means that's a whole bunch of makeup that has to be done and a whole bunch of costumes that have to be made. And this probably blew through their budget.
And I could tell too, just in watching it with you, Abbie, that there's clearly more to this episode than meets the eye watching it in order for the first time, where you said something about the Orions, and to me, I'm
before
like,
it came up, I hadn't seen this episode.
Yeah, like, you had said, is that an Orion? And I was like, what the hell are the Orions?
But we've seen the Orions in previous episodes.
The green guys?
Yeah.
That was a Gorn.
No, there was one
Aaron
in the cage. When like literally the first episode when he makes what's her face green.
Oh, yeah, but they don't talk about that yet.
Okay,
they don't show male.
An Orion slave girl. Like they literally as an Orion slave. Like,
I know it, but I had forgotten what an Orion was at that point. So what I saw was the Andorian, and I was like, oh my gosh. But same concept. That character and that makeup, that look, that's the same look they do now. Like that has not changed. Now the Klingons, that's a whole different story, but like they picked something and we stuck with it for 40, 50 years.
I love the Klingon discussion. That's a thing for another day. When we're much further into this universe, because I love how they've addressed that over the years. It's fantastic.
They've addressed it?
Oh yeah. Oh, they're so good at that.
How?
Well, see, this is what you get for not watching things like, I don't know, DS9, and then still some of the later shows where they make references to these things. But that, like I said, that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, that's kind of diving into the next episode a bit with the Klingon, but I thought, don't the Klingons have some weird language, and don't they have like the pointy foreheads?
He knows enough. You got to bring it up, Nate. He knows enough. He's seen enough.
Not merely an Amish beard.
There's reasons. I'm not gonna go there. We're gonna take
go there. He knows enough.
I don't. I just know that the Klingons that we've seen thus far are not what I would have expected.
It's like a courtroom. He's brought it up. It's discovered now.
I've opened the door.
Record. He's opened the door. It can now be discussed without us breaching it.
I mean, I'll talk about it. It's going to take us way off track. So
let's do it. I want to hear. I'm actually curious.
So they talk about this specifically. See, no, I can't. Let's table it until next week. Because it's much better to talk about after we've watched one of the episodes that's coming up next week.
Ew.
It's directly relevant to one of the episodes for next week. I'm just gonna leave it there. Plus my favorite of the original series episodes, which means it's literally all downhill from here. Buckle up for the first 10 from me on the podcast for next week. Just a sneak peek. I'm already giving it.
It's obviously Trouble with Tribbles.
100% of this. Best episode. But the thing that and again, because I don't think they actually say it in this episode, But what I kind of loved about it was it is the first time we see all at once humans, Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites. And that's important because those are the 4 species that founded the Federation. They're the original 4 that came together to create what is the Federation in this show. And then obviously different, member races, had joined over the years. But it's those 4. So to kind of see them together and, interacting and discussing this vote that's apparently very important to the Tellarites is kind of fun to watch.
But they didn't really go into that background of it in the episode, did they?
They don't.
Okay.
They don't
I was
talk
going to
about
say,
it
did I just miss that, or was it just this group is here, they're part of this
I don't
thing?
even know when they first say that that's the case, but that is the case.
Yeah. And I did notice in this one they had more references to dilithium crystals, and that being a big thing. They have more references to the Rigel system. That seems to be a pretty important system. They've got Rigel 5 they were talking about, and then there was Rigel 7 that we've seen previously.
Which one's the pleasure planet, Nate?
Ryza.
Pleasure planet. Ryza. There you go. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was looking at a little bit of trivia on this one and saw that Leonard Nimoy, after coming up with the Vulcan salute and some other things, came up with the index and middle finger way of Sarek and his wife connecting and walking and doing all that.
I loved that. And they kept that.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was kind of, they keep that through. So I love how that was just and it was so consistent, right? Like if that's how they're doing their high five with the split fingers, it makes sense they'd like keep fingers touched. Although as you keep watching into like later movies, you're like, was that like overtly sexual that entire time? Like if we're talking like later on, maybe weird.
I don't know if I ever picked up on that.
Well, I'm just okay. So I'm thinking like, what's her name? Christy Alley.
Oh, yeah.
Savick. I'm talking Savick. So that's where I'm going. I'm like, wait a second. They made that very clearly something else later on, but the same thing. So I'm like, what does that gesture actually mean?
I know. I
right
now I have to go back and watch that because I didn't catch that at all.
Yeah. So thought it was interesting the way they reuse certain actors as different characters, with Sarek being the Romulan that we saw in season 1.
Yep. Sure did. Did you read the trivia on that, or did you just catch it?
I think I remembered that coming up from our conversations. He looked familiar, but then reading the trivia.
You're right. I think we did literally say that in that episode. We kind of spoiled it for you. Yeah,
but again, just kind of how that show, how the series went. They had different characters in it, or different actors in as, or they had the same actor in as different characters in a number of instances, and not very frequently had, I think to this point at least, and I don't know if it happens any other time in the series, so far I think it's only been Mud that has been the same actor as the same character in multiple episodes. That's not one of the core, like one of the guest stars, you would say.
Thus far, yes.
Yeah. So I didn't really have much else on this episode. I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was okay. You gave it an 8. I gave it a 6. Abbie?
I'll give it a 6. I mean, it was interesting. We have the Sarek piece, but nothing really like drew my attention on other than that. There was not like a dilemma wasn't really that big to me. So kind of our first time seeing people use genetic espionage, I guess. Where we're changing our genetic code to look like somebody else. It's the first time we've ever heard of that. I did not know that originated all the way back in the original series, because we definitely see it later on. I did not recognize that, so that was interesting to me, but it wasn't something where I was like, hey, cool. I I nothinged it. It wasn't cringy. It wasn't like, ooh, I must watch this again. It was just was.
You know, I mean, I kind of loved again some of the dialogue at the end. I love the interaction between Spock and Sarek when Amanda loses her cool and just she has this outburst where she starts yelling about logic. And Spock goes, emotional, isn't she? Sarek, she's always been that way. Indeed. Why did you marry her? It at the time seemed the logical thing to do. just like poking her. And I love that. I thought it was so great. It was, yeah.
I mean, Amanda's kind of classic, right? We've grown up.
Yeah.
We've grown up hearing about Amanda forever. And it's just, Sarek married Amanda. That's just the thing. So it was kind of fun seeing her. I don't think I've actually seen this episode before, but we've heard Amanda referenced before.
So this is the first time to see this one, huh?
I believe so. I think I know I've seen the one after with the aging one. I remember that one. And the one before it, I don't care. But this one I don't remember watching or seeing. So no, it was interesting actually seeing Amanda and seeing like you said, the hand holding with the fingers and stuff like that. No, this is my first time. And it brought me back, I feel like, a little bit. And it was consistent for me with Star Trek. I mean, it was just consistent. I don't know.
I agree. I know. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great episode. So hence my 8.
All right. Ready to move on to the second but last episode for this week?
Yes.
Episode 11, Friday's Child, which I don't quite understand the name. Apparently it comes from some poem. But yeah, the name, it is whatever. This was a weird episode for me. Early on in the episode, I thought it was great. I loved the early part of the episode. I thought it was super fun. I thought it was just really entertaining. A lot of great stuff in it. I thought the music I thought was awesome, at least in the first like half of the episode. But then the pacing got just, I felt kind of off. I don't know if I was, again, just tired, and I went from being like, this episode is awesome, to nearly asleep and looking and just thinking like, how in the hell is there 20 minutes left of this episode? So early on, I was going to probably give this one an 8, and then it just fell off a cliff, and I was left feeling just okay. So I've got 3 6s this week. This one I gave a 6 as well. While
you didn't love
early on though in the episode, I thought it was, I don't even know what it was that I thought was so strong, but I thought it was an incredibly strong episode at the beginning. I thought Kirk's banter with the Klingon was great. I thought it was fun. They were seeing some new planet, or we were introduced to a new planet and a new people, and how they were doing things in these 10 tribes or whatever, and how they're working together, and then turned into a huge battle. And on the Enterprise, they're concerned with this Klingon ship that's in the area that they can tell is there, even if it's out of their range or they're out of its range. But I liked how they were well aware of the things that Kirk couldn't communicate to them, but showing Scotty knew what he was doing. He was able to be on top of all of that. And yeah, there was just a lot that I really liked at the beginning. But then once they got out of the village and they got into that cave, it just, I felt like it just kind of fell off of a cliff, and was just like, is this episode still going on? It was almost like 2 separate episodes in the way it felt.
So it's really funny that that's how you describe it. Because I mean, I'll start by saying I wasn't as high about the front half of the episode as you were, but I definitely agree on the back half of the episode. But here's the interesting thing for me. I thought I had finished this one. So when we talked about, hey, we need to take a break for a couple of weeks, and I was like, cool, I finished the first two. I still have one left. No, I was at the halfway point of this episode.
Felt like the episode was over.
Yeah. And I was at the point where they were going to leave the village to go to the cave. Like that, like literally they're just about to leave the Tears tent with her. And then it's, all the cave stuff. And I mean, overall I gave it a 6. I think one of my biggest problems with it was effectively we've seen this episode before. Which is this whole concept of you've got some planet that's not very advanced or, seemingly not very advanced. They have some resource or some strategic location that both the Federation and the Klingons want. And so you end up with Kirk and some random Klingon on the planet trying to convince the leader that, they have to join the Federation or join the Klingon Empire. We've had this episode before.
Yeah.
And that kind of from the jump was like, I'm not into this. Like, there's clearly a lot that they could do with, the Klingon storyline that they just decided not to do in this episode. And I just couldn't really get behind it.
Yeah.
And not to mention just kind of some of the silly decisions that they make throughout the episode. And I don't know. It was okay.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, we come to the same conclusion, but I don't know if it was, sure we've seen this before, but I thought it was just well done. Like I said, I don't know what it was exactly, but I thought the way they did the music in the first half of the episode really worked. That was something that just stuck out to me. But yeah, then it just got the pacing got weird, and it just the back half of the episode just did not work for me.
No. It was almost like two different people wrote the episode. Like,
yeah,
I'm going back and there's no additional credits. It is interesting because this was written by DC Fontana, she's like, the godmother of Star Trek, right? I mean, she's known as one of the best writers for the show. Also wrote Journey to Babel, that we just talked about, that you two also weren't a big fan of, and we haven't heard from Abbie yet, but I can kind of tell from her facial expressions that she isn't disagreeing too much with anything that's being said.
I think it was shortly after I grabbed the TV remote to see how much time was left in the episode, and was like, I was shocked that there was 20 minutes left. And I think it was within a minute or two after that, Abbie said something like, "Isn't this episode like super boring?" I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was something to that effect.
Yep, that's what I said. It was just boring.
Yeah. Now, I mean, thought it was funny.
It gets a little interesting when you've got the random domestic violence going on. That just really kind of makes you wake up a little bit as we slap pregnant women. But
yeah. And how much
she slapped him first twice.
I'm not saying nothing.
He was basically like,
but he was so proud. He smacked the shit out of a very pregnant woman.
Give her a happy
pill. Slapped him twice, and he was just like, "Cut that shit out."
Yeah. Give her a happy pill? No, a right cross. Nope. I've never
helped McCoy's wife.
Book.
He doesn't do those dishes in time. Smack, smack.
Yeah. I've never seen that in a medical book. It's in mine from now on. He literally said that.
Yeah.
Good Lord. That's honestly the only thing about that episode I remember. I remember thinking that plot twist was interesting, that they actually killed someone. That wasn't just a red I gotta backtrack. Aaron immediately has figured out our red jumpsuits die. Yeah. He's like, I did die, and then he gets killed right away.
Because it started out with them just beaming down to the planet, and I was like, I wonder who's there, and I was like, okay, it's Kirk, Spock, Bones, and Dead Guy.
Yeah, I mean, I literally
and within moments he was dead.
Our young grasshopper has learned so quickly how Star Trek works.
Literally, line 6 of my notes says 1 red shirt equals 1 casualty, and then line 7 says, "Yep, he's dead."
Yeah.
So I did find that, but I will say the original concept of essentially a coup was a clever concept, and that they got caught in the middle of it. I think that's, again, realistic on that. I think it's very consistent with like the barbarian tribe kind of feeling, where it's like, yeah, we kill our wives or whatever, all of that. I think all of the characters really stayed true to themselves on that. Kirk not being able to resist helping someone who's struggling regardless of their consent to do so. McCoy needs to work on consent.
Forget the prime directive.
Again, forget the prime directive. But consent is an issue again on this one. But hey, we learned 60s don't have that. Other than that, I just didn't care. Like, there was just nothing. I don't even know what was going on, to be honest. Like, okay, they're trying to convince them to side with them versus the Klingons, and these are just warlike people. It seems like the Klingons are playing the game better because they're acting all warlike, but it's just all of a sudden the end.
Like,
I don't know. It was just
that's my challenge. And then magically at the end of it, they get the mining rights, and it's happily ever after.
Yeah. It was just such a subtle, or excuse me, not a subtle. It was such a quick changeover. It was just like, oh, that was convenient.
Now, what I did like in that episode was I really, really love whenever Scotty is in command. There's just something about him just owning the bridge that is awesome. I think they maybe realized a little too late that, it was a trap. And, I think once they realized that, the distress call named the Enterprise by name, that should have been a pretty big clue that something else is going on here. And they kind of like, we're going to wait it out, and then decide to go back. And then magically there's another distress call where Scotty's finally like, we're going to ignore that one. Like, they finally, got there, but I don't know. I felt like that should have been a clue earlier on.
But that gave us one of the best lines of this episode.
Which one?
Where Scotty goes, there's an old Earth saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And then you've got Chekhov. Oh, yes. It's a Russian saying.
It's from Russia.
It's developed in Russia. But I love that. I love that whole... that was great dialogue.
I loved even more than that. I loved the reactions to it, because Sulu laughed and Scotty gave a look like, this shit again.
Yeah. Right.
And I loved,
in the middle of crisis.
I loved that different. I made a note here, invented in Russia, and then Sulu versus the Scotty reactions I thought were just awesome.
I just love every time Chekhov throws that in there, that something happens. Like, the Garden of Eden was in Russia. Like okay. Whatever you say, man.
But that's, I think, I mean, I love, again, we talked about this on the previous episode, it sticks through even the movies. We're talking, this sticks for a very long time. So seeing the origins of this joke kind of feels like we're getting in on the inside joke at the beginning, is what it feels. It's like, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I loved it. I love that line.
It is
and
a great.
I had forgotten. They did have the requirement to go out and to investigate. That is something that they're required to do. And truthfully, I don't know if I would have noticed right away if someone was like, if they said it. It's a common trope in movies, right? Where they say the fact of, oh, I didn't tell you the person's name. You know what I mean? Oh, you didn't. And that's how they mess up, and that's how they catch it. That's such a common trope.
For sure.
I mean, most recently I can think of Doctor Strange 2, right? I didn't say her name, did I? It's just, so that doesn't bother me at all that he fell for it the first time, because everyone falls for it the first time.
It's not so much that they responded to the distress signal. It's that, once they couldn't find anything and they kind of re-looked at it, went back to the micro tape, by the way, how very 60s, that they realized that it called the Enterprise out by name, and that wasn't the clue, right? Of, oh, that's interesting. It shouldn't have been like that. Let's go back. It was, oh, that's interesting.
Didn't they say that though? I thought that's why he said it. That's why.
But they didn't go back. They kept looking. They looked for a little while longer.
Really? I thought that's why Scotty said, no, they called us up by name. This is a trap. I swear maybe I misheard it. I thought that's when Scotty figured out that it wasn't.
But then he said that they were going to look for a little while longer and head back. And it's when then they turned back that they got the second distress call from a different ship. And he said, we're going to ignore it. And you can note in the log that I said that.
I thought the going back to ironically the part that I thought was weaker in the episode overall, when they left the village, they were in the cave when she was giving birth, and then she was basically saying, oh yes, this child is now yours, because he had just
child
that
belongs to the man
confusion. But then he says, no, say the child is mine. The child is mine. She's like, yes, the child is yours. He's like, no, it's, you say it's mine.
I swear to God, we had this exact conversation with our daughter when it comes to like, no.
Yeah.
Say, I want to go to bed. You want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Say good night, Betty. Good night, Betty.
Exactly.
But then she named the baby Leonard James Aka.
Yeah, I love that.
I thought that was kind of fun.
Destined to go down in galactic history.
So
I think you are both going to be insufferably pleased with yourselves for at least a month, sir.
Yeah. Oh.
That part made me laugh. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I think it was the stuff like that. And again, I thought the beginning was a fun part of the episode. I liked kind of the banter, the back and forth between Kirk and the Klingon, and just them each kind of pushing their side of their argument to the I don't even know what the people were called, but that the tribes. Yes.
They were the
yeah, I thought I think it was that kind of I liked it. Had a decent finish in that final bridge scene like usual, that kind of wrapped it up nicely. But yeah, again, overall just felt it was okay. Nate, is that what you said too?
Yep.
Solid 6.
Solid 6. No more, no less.
Abbie?
I'm with you. I'll give it a 6 too. I nothinged it. I wasn't offended by it. I just didn't care.
You heard it here first, folks. She was not offended by domestic violence.
Well, what does that tell you about how much this like desensitized me watching this show? Like on a scale of crap that they have pulled on this, outright slapping a woman in labor is not high on that list. It's like, that's cringy in and of itself to myself. What have you guys done to me? I no longer care.
So I was watching a YouTube video the other night, and they were talking about computer technology and stuff like over the years. And yes, I am that big of a nerd that I watch stuff like this. And I thought it was really interesting.
Shocked me.
Yeah. They referenced Star Trek specifically in this video in the original series, because they talk a lot about or let me back up. You see in this show that they've got switches and lights and like ticker tape and stuff like that, but you never see computer screens. You never see text on a screen. And it was an interesting call out because at that time in the 60s, there weren't really computer monitors either. It was a period of time where everything was mostly done with teletype. Wow. So you'd input stuff in using a keyboard and the output would get printed via typewriter using actually the same technology that they were using for teletype telegraphs. And it was just kind of to me that was super interesting because it shows how like they were trying to look forward to the future, but there's a limit to how forward looking you can kind of be, right? They hadn't really imagined monitors.
Yeah, you have to imagine it, they'll do it, right?
Well, and that too, it's like if they could think of that at that time, they would have had it. I mean, it's your hindsight is like, how could you have not seen this? But like you said, in a way, it's like, okay, they've got that kind of output, but they also have the computer speaking it back to them. And then just what you said there made me think of the line from Apollo 13 when he's giving the tour of the Space Center, and he's just like, imagine the technological advances we'll have someday, a computer that fits in a single room, like and just that kind of advancement. But yeah, they had no idea the stuff that we would have today that's just normal. Yeah,
and that
I
makes
think
you wonder,
that's
like,
interesting too.
the stuff we see today that then shows up in modern Trek as being futuristic. When we fast forward 30 years, are we still going to think that's so futuristic, or is it going to be something wildly different?
Yeah.
I just heard the other day that our Apple Watches are going to be the pagers of the 90s. Like, our kids are going to see our Apple Watches in our pictures, and I'll be like, "Oh my God, Mom, why are you wearing that all the time?"
I believe it.
Why were you wearing a cell phone holster?
Yeah, like, same concept. I mean, cell phone holsters, yes. I mean, maybe those aren't as bad for me because I still see people wearing those, whereas you don't see pagers.
Wearing those all the time.
Yeah, so it's not as, they're not quite as retired yet, but I mean, I'm going as far as thinking like cars. Like, we're gonna be the generation will be like, yeah, we used to drive cars around.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, and I can be like, yeah, I know how to drive a stick shift. And they'll be like, what? Yeah, I do. I know how those gears work. Apparently I'm old. What is the FAA? I told Aaron this the other day. FAA just approved the first flying car.
It's coming.
It's just like, here we go. We got the Jetsons coming on, and I immediately said Jetsons. So I talked to Aaron. I was like, but you know what? Going back to our whole Star Trek thing, and Star Trek is known to have spurred on so much innovation. I was like, it's a shuttlecraft. Think of something we don't yet have in Star Trek. We don't have shuttlecrafts yet. Nothing that can like actively fly around a city if we wanted to. I mean, the shuttlecrafts do that. They're not just in space.
The communicator is the inspiration for the cell phone.
Yep.
Right down to the flip action to open it.
Mm-hmm. I want them to do the teleporter. I want that.
That'd be so cool. Katie made the comment the other day that she really wants them to invent the transporter, and she wants them to roll it out to restaurants first, specifically Chick-fil-A, so that you can place an order and it will just get transported to your kitchen counter.
That would be sweet.
I'm sorry, you would like that from Chick-fil-A when you live in a place that has Raising Cane's.
I was saying, you can go anywhere. Her go-to is Chick-fil-A. Like, if you're talking transporter for food,
Chick-fil-A is fine.
So many other places we could go.
Chick-fil-A is
you're
fine.
Talking anywhere in the world, Aaron, they could transport you food from, and your go-to is.
First off,
I'd like kind of fast food. Yeah, I guess. Mm-hmm.
No, we have
first off. I didn't suggest Chick-fil-A. Katie did. Secondly,
you're being awfully defensive for somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with it.
Just got to share a bed with her later tonight.
Your hatred of Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A is the best.
I don't hate Chick-fil-A. It's good, but
he just nothings it.
I don't even nothing it. I enjoy Chick-fil-A, but you live in a place that has Raising Cane's.
I mean,
we do not. Raising Cane's.
I mean, if you can survive your entire menu on 3 things, they've got to be good things, right?
I feel like maybe
if your menu
for you too,
your menu, they're not opening franchises in Florida. Don't think I haven't looked.
There is a new Wendy's though right down the street, and someone actually put on the thread for it. They're like, "Why can't this be a Raising Cane's? We don't have any here." And I was like, "Just me." I joined that bandwagon real quick. And I personally don't like Chick-fil-A. The peanut oil makes it hard for me to breathe, so I tend to not eat that.
That's a legit detail. I'll give you that.
No, I think Chick-fil-A is good. That notwithstanding.
I mean,
apparently people like it for the ice. Like, are you aware of this? Like, apparently their Coke is the best Coke in the world. I did not even know that was a thing. I don't drink pop, so I'm not one to know about that.
They've got the hospital pellet ice. That really soft ice that's very satisfying to chew. It's the same thing that Sonic has.
Oh yeah, we like Sonic now. We do have a Sonic here.
So it's that ice. So if you get a Sonic, it comes with that really soft ice that you can just chew on. That's why people like their ice. Now, let's take the transporter thing out of this for a second. I have a Chick-fil-A that's 5 minutes from my house. The nearest Raising Cane's is easily 30 minutes.
Worth it.
No, not.
Well, I mean, it's 30 minutes to get there. It's 30 minutes in line, 30 minutes to get home.
Right.
Still worth it.
Wow.
You can order online and go pick it up.
Chick-fil-A.
You could eat it there. I agree. I mean, if we're talking about technology, though, going back to kind of like Star Trekking this, if we're talking about technology we're waiting for, I've said I want transporters. Despite McCoy's whole I can't trust these machines, can't trust this, and they seem to always be messing up one way or the other. I think they're pretty awesome. I don't know if we'll ever have that. I mean, I think like a lot of these technological things that they like dreamt about within Star Trek, no one ever thought would actually be real. So, I mean, right now, I think it's completely improbable. It's not going to happen. We'll never have that. But I hope that someone smarter than me is like, I could make this work.
I love the idea of getting up in the morning and being like, I've got a meeting in Dallas today, and just transporting down to Dallas, do my meeting or meetings, transport back. I don't get on a plane. I don't sleep in a hotel. I sleep in my own bed that night.
Well, I mean,
sounds
even think of us. I mean, we moved across the country.
Yeah.
So, I mean, be able to like be like, hey, get together this weekend. We'll be like, cool, we'll be there.
Yeah.
The extension of that is, Abbie, do you remember when we used to do the book club and we read the Hyperion series? And
which one's that one?
It would, how do I describe the Hyperion series? It's like there are a number of different books. I can't remember what they all are. This was like 10 plus years ago. But the thing that I remember is the guy who had a house, but each room was like in a different part of the galaxy. So like you walked through a portal to get from the living room to the kitchen, and you were instantly somewhere else.
Oh, it's like that crazy level of Halo.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a living room in Minnesota and a lanai in Florida and be like,
oh my gosh,
we're going to hang out in Minnesota, but it's cold, so I'm going to go sit on the lanai.
I was going to say the alternative to that is just have a house in Florida.
Yeah.
So I will say this, and here's something I do think technology will do / catch up with. I don't think we'll have formal walls in the future. I think our walls will be some sort of force field or something like that can be made opaque, that we can move around, where it's not going to be we put studs in the walls and we do drywall and we do all this stuff, and then we do trim to hide the drywall touching the floor, which is the whole point of drywall, or trim and all that kind of jazz. I don't think we're going to do any of that. I think that we are going to do just it's just going to be force fields. Sorry, I got distracted by something. Force fields, and I think that's what we're going to see.
I need them to get a lot better with smart bulbs than they are now. Before I'd be on board with that. You turned the light off twice, and now you messed everything up.
That's accurate. Danny likes to reset our bulbs to rainbow mode just to irritate Aaron.
You locked and unlocked the door too many times. Now the house is gone.
That'd be really
fun.
But
I do think that's something that's going to happen, though, Aaron. Yeah. I mean, as joking as you are on that, I think it's a thing. I also think we're going to have whole house chargers. So forget this whole, we plug our whatever it is into the charger. and go from there. We're going to have the whole house will be on a, you walk into the zone and the whole house will be charging. So you don't have to have, our kids will be like, you had outlets everywhere. We'll be like, hell yeah, we did. And we fought over those little bricks like they were valuable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, anything else you want to add to this one?
Yeah. Any closing thoughts on any of these episodes?
I
just thought they were all just okay.
Yeah. I mean,
nothing great, nothing bad, nothing. All of these, I think, are more or less forgettable.
I like Journey of Babel, but the rest of them, yeah, forget about it. Don't need to ever see him again.
Well, when we do part 2, doing the rewatch, so I can see all of these with context, we'll have to.
Yes, for sure. That'll add another 10 years on this podcast, right?
Right. It can go forever.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. Well, man, we wrapped this one up quick.
We didn't have
your lights haven't even turned off yet.
No, I got a whole 22 minutes for those
three episodes of just kind of
So next week
kind of do that. Next week we have one of your favorite episodes yet.
Yep. And I'll probably hate the other two, but I have no idea what they are.
Fair enough.
Obsession, Wolf in the Fold, and The Trouble with Tribbles.
I'm guessing you like The Wolf in the Fold?
Obsession. That's my middle name. Just kidding.
Jesus.
No, I'm excited for that episode. In fact, I'm going to rate it right now just because.
Which one?
You have to rewatch it before
Obsession?
you rate it.
No, The Trouble with Tribbles.
Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh.
I'm rating it right now. I don't know.
I will say I'm trying not to be swayed by the IMDb ratings, so I'm not going to give too much credence to that, but just the thumbnail they have for that on IMDb, I will say it makes me think of the Beanie Baby or Fuzzy Buddy episode of Third Rock from the Sun, where Dick is obsessed with collecting all of the Fuzzy Buddies that he possibly can. That's what I get from the thumbnail picture I see for the Trouble with Tribbles episode.
Then he would really like the Tribbles.
And that's what I gather. But yeah, I do know we did have back when we had the apartment, a Tribble that squeaked around our apartment for quite some time until the squeaker or the battery in it died.
Love it.
Didn't it shake too?
Yeah, it shook and did the squeaky noise. It was a thing. This is real.
I believe it. I can't wait. It's gonna be good.
They bought it from some website where you could also buy a Tauntaun sleeping bag where the zipper was a lightsaber handle.
ThinkGeek.com.
Yeah, that's it.
That used to be the greatest website on earth. I don't think it exists anymore. But the Tauntaun sleeping bag was an April Fool's joke. Every year they put out a whole bunch of stuff on their website that wasn't real, and that one was so popular that they actually licensed it and made Tauntaun sleeping bags.
Well, if you go to thinkgeek.com, it goes to gamestop.com/collectibles.
They got bought probably 10 years ago now, which is ironic that they got bought by GameStop, but yeah. Think Geek was the best. I love that website.
Well, there you go. I want to dive in on a couple of lines from The Deadly Years when Wallace said, "Look, we know the problem. We know the progress of the affliction. Therefore, once we find the proper line of research, it's only logical we find the solution. No problem is insoluble, not even ours." I know I've mentioned it before, and I'm sure I'll mention it again and again, but I love the book The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. Written in 2011, it discusses the human ability to explain and understand our world. Problems, explanations, solutions, knowledge. In the beginning of Infinity, he says, "It is inevitable that we face problems, but no particular problem is inevitable. We survive and thrive by solving each problem as it comes up. And since the human ability to transform nature is limited only by the laws of physics, none of the endless stream of problems will ever constitute an impassable barrier." So, a complementary and equally important truth about people and the physical world is that problems are soluble. By soluble, I mean that the right knowledge would solve them. It is not, of course, that we can possess knowledge just by wishing for it, but it is in principle accessible to us. I recently had a discussion with some old friends, and I tried to explain some of these points, but evidently did a fairly poor job of it. Then again, maybe we just disagreed in the end. Hardly shocking with that group of friends. We disagreed on the notion of whether or not it is possible for something to be beyond the capacity of humans to understand. Deutsch addressed this too. But if the claim is that we may be qualitatively unable to understand what some other forms of intelligence can, if our disability cannot be remedied by mere automation, then this is just another claim that the world is not explicable. Indeed, it is tantamount to an appeal to the supernatural, with all the arbitrariness that is inherent in such appeals. For if we wanted to incorporate into our worldview an imaginary realm explicable only to superhumans, we need never have bothered to abandon the myths of Persephone and her fellow deities. There's a way of thinking that says there's a limit to what humans can comprehend, and that limit is essentially what we already comprehend. It is difficult to reconcile that there are things we are capable of knowing and understanding that we don't yet know. But isn't that the story of humanity in a nutshell? Well, thanks for indulging me for a minute to talk about one of my favorite books. I'm sure it won't be the last time either. I am fascinated by the universality of this show, and this is hardly the only time. We've seen example after example of some philosophical or societal discussion happening back in the late 1960s, which is still happening today in the mid-2020s. The execution isn't always perfect, but this series has tapped into something real, something deep, something that transcends time. Lastly, I do want to point out that we are not sponsored by either Chick-fil-A or Raising Cane's yet. And while a fan of both, come on, there is only one real option. Come on, Nate, get your head out of your ass. Leave a comment with your favorite order from Cane's. There is a right answer, and that answer is the Caniac Combo. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining us on our voyages into the universe of Star Trek. If you're watching along with us, next week we will be discussing the next 3 episodes of the original series Season 2, Obsession, Wolf in the Fold, and The Trouble with Tribbles. As always, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. For Abbie and Nate, this is Aaron reminding you to never give up, never surrender.
I disagree.